for a layperson who would like an idea of who Neil Gaiman is in the present, as well as what works he composed over the years, which built up which fortified the very powerful reputation he has today, and which is documented very thoroughly in this particular piece here from 2016, which details the final ever book signing tour Gaiman will ever go on, because these tours are so extensive and can be very time consuming, and his celebrity status he feels is sometimes impugned on his time to write, and so he's going to spend as much more time the rest of his life writing as possible. I once heard an interesting anecdote. I read Neil Gaiman recount an instance wherein he was at a little fun trivial conference, about, all these people, famous people named Neil, had gathered together. Neil found himself feeling a bit shy. He was discussing this in the context of feeling like he had imposter syndrome, and he's at this place and he's thinking, I'm just Neil Gaiman, I'm known as a comic book writer, most well known, and the people who take me seriously as an author in literature tend to be comic book fans in the first place, so, I'm feeling maybe a little insecure about that. And he comes across this famous Neil in the corner, and he's chatting to him, realizes he's talking to Neil Armstrong, and he's taken aback. Oh my goodness, what an exciting opportunity. He gets to speak to Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, one-on-one. And then Armstrong expresses a thought as though he'd spoken it from Gaiman's head. Neil Armstrong looks around and says, I don't even know if I really belong here, if I deserve to be here. Gaiman's thinking, but you're Neil Armstrong, you walked on the moon. If anyone deserves to be at one of these things, it's you, isn't it? Well, what's an accomplishment if that's not an accomplishment? Another aspect of Neil Gaiman, which I thoroughly admire, is his admiration and his help in popularizing the work of the absolutely, absolutely brilliant short story writer. And I imagine he's a very strong novelist as well. I've not read his novels, but I'm a bit familiar. I've read at least a couple of dozens of stories from R.A. Lafferty. Lafferty was described by Gaiman as the best short story writer in the world. I would recommend 9,000 Grandmothers. I would recommend The Six Fingers of Time. I would absolutely recommend the very topical, Slow Tuesday Night, as well as The World as Will and Wallpaper. And pretty much every text within the recent SF Masterworks publication of R.A. Lafferty's short stories, I think I would consider all of those to be at least approaching masterpiece status. Neil Gaiman. I never finished Sandman. I got maybe 5 to 6 volumes in as far as the trade paperbacks are concerned. And what struck me most about that series was the primary story of the 4th trade paperback, wherein Dream had been given dominion over hell by Lucifer, who left to star in the spin-off series Lucifer, which became a terrible, terrible show later. Actually, Sandman had a show which some people say was not half bad, although I don't have time for television, as it were. Anyway, when Dream was considering who to auction off hell to, who of all these figures from mythology, with Japanese gods, I think even a Hawaiian gods from European or Celtic mythology, all these figures of these world myths, it's like the kind of thing which sets the precedent for the very beautiful and brilliant Hellboy /PPRD series from Mike Mignola, which is more or less my favorite thing in comic books. But Sandman set the precedent for something like that, I think. And I will never forget how riveting, daring, audacious, and fucking fun that particular Sandman story was. For all the brooding it might be accused of, for all the Peter Murphying that might be thrown toward it as an accusation in both its prose and in its the look of the character, Dream, it could be a very entertaining read as well if you just gave it time. Or if... I mean, I remember the earlier portions of the first Sandman trade paperback, reading that when I was 16, after having read things like Preacher and Transmetropolitan and Ride the Last Man, feeling it was a bit slow, but once I once you're in, you are very much in. I had at least one commenter who I was very fond of. He doesn't appear to comment much anymore, but he stopped uploading videos, which is quite frightening. I hope he didn't accidentally. He used to comment about how he'd accidentally cut himself open with various edged weapons, whether he was working on stuff in the yard, whether he was sharpening a bamboo stick for some reason. I don't know if it was. It sounded like kind of early 2000s geek forum humor stuff to me, like from the old IMDb forums. So I thought he was joking, but I hope he's alright. Anyway, I remember he expressed disdain for Neil Gaiman. It was brought up in the context of that Alice Cooper album, which Neil Gaiman had some involvement with, because the guy liked Alice Cooper. It was honky tonk, Grionka donk. I'm a bit lazy to include the sound effect there. Sorry, Godzilla fans. Anyway, and he said he never got Neil Gaiman. He thought it was a bit too Tim Burton-y. And I feel that. I get why. I mean, I'm not the biggest Tim Burton fan personally. The Ed Wood movie's great. And I actually like the 89 Batman. That's been stated on this channel before, though. Although, just reading that Sandman story from the fourth trade paperback on its own, it's a thrilling, riveting, and highly entertaining read. As much as any superhero yarn is.